Okay. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Amil Haddad with Development Engineering, and I oversee the development inspection process. And I have my colleague here, Thomas McCauley. He's our lead inspector. So for development engineering, development engineering reviews transportation and stormwater plans submitted by private developers to ensure they meet engineering standards and erosion control regulations. The purpose of the reviews is so facilities are built to protect public health and safety, as well as being durable and easily maintained. The development inspection case, that's what DIN stands for, is when projects come in for review and meet certain thresholds. For grading and stormwater, they're required to have a development inspection case. The thresholds will vary per project, so every project will have a certain threshold that we have to look for and meet, and that will tell us where the DIN will hold and what grading and stormwater engineering permit will need. So for example, if we have a grading work in an urban area, for instance, on a site less than 1 acre, but the earth material is more than 50 cubic yards, then a grading permit is required, which will introduce what that is. So then is a DIN. So for projects typically requiring a DIN case, that is anything like all new subdivisions, so massive clusters of homes. You'll see those all around Clark County, especially now. Short plats, that is anything between 2 to 9 lots. We consider that small cluster a short plat. Site plans, which for all intents and purposes, in this case, we just say anything that is typically a commercial project. We refer to that as a site plan. And then drainage projects and excavations, as well as fill and stockpile permits. And then, of course, private residences on tax lots. So we consider those NHCs or new home construction. Okay. So the development inspection case is a subset of the grading and engineering case. So you'll never have a DIN unless you have one or the other. When the grading and engineering is approved in your engineering case, the applicant will receive a notice of construction of approval letter from one of our gals in office that require them to apply for a DIN case. So what we use at Clark County is CCLMS. So the Clark County Learning Land Management System. You'll need to apply for a DIN through that. You'll create your own account, submit for a DIN case, obviously following either your grading or your engineering project, and then you're going to have to submit the following items to us. So as you can see here, the DIN application, we will need that to be fully filled out with authorization letters if needed. The reason I say authorization letters is sometimes a lot of developers, there are certain owners that own the land, and then they hire the developer or an engineer or an applicant, as we refer to them, to submit on their behalf and be able to obviously give authorization to do the work. So if we don't see, after we check and go thoroughly vet the project, if we don't see that the owner is listed, we need an authorization letter from the owner signifying that you have the power to do so, and then of course submit on the on the owner's behalf. So that is the applicant. So the DIN application is very important. And then we also required to have a certified erosion and sediment control lead certificate. In short, we refer to that as the CECL. That is one of the requirements for the upload. And then we require the staff report or hearing examiner's report. To you, that may or may not make much of a difference, but depending on the type of the project that is being reviewed and the capacity, you'll have one or both of those reports that we review. In short, that is land use, prelim application, pre-application conference, all that stuff coming together to have set of conditions, reviews, findings on the property, things that we actually review before you get to your engineering, stormwater, and then of course myself, which is the DIN case. Then we will require you have the approved engineering and grading plan set. Those will need to be digitally uploaded as well. The full set, this is the approved set that we reviewed, as well as the 11 by 17 reduced size version that we will require for you to be dropped off here in this building. And then lastly, you'll need to upload a copy of the construction approval letter, which you will have a copy. The construction approval letter and a CECL certificate, just for your visual queue, if you will, look just like this. So the notice of final construction approval plan, you're going to have where it shows the DIN permit. That is your case that you have applied for. It'll show approved by our manager. In this case, it would be Dan. And then the project name, for all intents and purposes, an example, it just shows Learning Lab, but this would be, insert name here, subdivision or whatever the case is, and the date that we issued it by development engineering. It'll have general instructions as well as requirements that are checked. So you can see here on what is requested. These are items and cues for you to know that these items are needed for you to submit within the DIN case. And then, of course, you have the LMS submittal process, which is what we use, CCLMS, the land management system that we use. That's where you'll initially upload for the DIN, okay? To the right, we have an example of the CECL certificate itself. So it'll typically show the name of the company of which you're associated with. Really what we look for here is the full name. And I want to see when you actually have the certification date, when it expires, and then your identification number. We always look that up to make sure it is active and accurate. We cannot take in the CECL unless it is active, so that is important. And in this case, especially if we have smaller projects, for instance, the homeowner on a tax lot can also be their own CECL. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The DIN application sample looks just like this one on the right. The development inspection application needs to be as accurate as possible. And it needs to reflect all the information, the values on the plans. We want to ensure that we're not overbilling you. This is crucial for me. I'm very, very picky, if you will, but it's to your best interest. We want to make sure the parcel number is correct, the address is correct, the values that you're putting in there, anything from the square footage, the acres, the cubic yards that you're evaluating, the disturbed area that is being taken into consideration, an MR 1 through 5 or an MR 1 through 9. That is, in short, what we use for minimum requirements that tell us exactly what we need to evaluate and what you need to submit to us. The number of lots, linear feet, etc. So a lot of this stuff for us, we base off of what the application is being submitted, what your engineering plans were approved. There is a quantities block on there that we actually evaluate and take a look at. And that is evidently really is kind of controlling what your bill is going to be. So for your best interest, we want to make sure everything is absolutely cohesive, it's comprehensive, and we have everything as accurately as possible so we don't overbill you, because our fees on the development inspection case are collected up front, and you don't want to overpay. And of course, a refund is never fun. So this is another example of the application over here. So you can see the second page and the third page of it are basically all the information of the applicant, the owner, the professionals associated, the contractor, and everyone else that is party to the project. We really want to be as cohesive as possible, because we don't want to be sending information out or lacking information that someone who's an important piece of the project that is not there. So we want to make sure everyone is informed when we send out our notices, our next steps, and so on. When you have your development inspection case, we have reviewed it and submitted all the requirement documents to the LMS system. We will review, myself and the team, will review all the submittals and help structure the case for the scope of the project. And what I mean by this is sometimes we have a larger subdivision that does come in. It's not all necessarily going to be done all 100 or 200 lots of it. So we need to make sure what parts of it are being phased, what parts of it are being done at this time, which part are we inspecting. So we make sure we have a certain development inspection case separate for each phase of it and structure it. So again, you're not overpaying. There's SWE fees, all the grading fees, erosion control. There's quite a bit that goes into it. So we don't want to just bill for one thing when only a small part's actually being done. So we definitely want to make sure we structure the DIN correctly. And then once the submittal is fully ready, all the documents are being taken in, we reviewed it, we're good to go. We assess the fees based on what you guys have submitted, as well as what the plans. And then in totality, we send you an outstanding fee sheet. And then if you look at Title 6, you should have it on your printout as well, but those are all of our fees associated with certain projects. So if you ever needed to get an idea of what a project might cost, that's one way to check all of our fees. You can also reach out to me and we can also get you an estimate. They'll get you all the total fees that you do have to pay and what a project will look like before you've been submitting. So that's a tool that we offer for folks. The fees are comprehensive and paid up front, so you typically will not have, there are some situations where we might have what we call an hourly billing at the end. That isn't common anymore. Most of our fees are collected up front. So what you pay up front is for the duration of the entire development inspection case. And then after all fees have paid, we'll route the case to schedule the pre-construction meeting with all parties involved. And this is one of those, you can see it in bold, do not start construction, please, until you've had the meeting with us. You know, a lot of folks make the mistake thinking that the engineering or their grading plans are approved. Please do not break ground, do not play in the dirt until we give you the go. Okay, it's very important. Once you get to the pre-construction meeting, our inspectors will schedule the pre-con meeting. In short, is what we refer to with you guys. It is a Teams meeting. It's a virtual meeting with all parties involved. The objective is to outline the construction and environmental conditions. We want to establish the timelines with you guys. We really want to make sure we introduce the team, everyone involved, make sure your questions are answered and you know who's going to be partaking in your project, especially on the public and the private end. That's really important. We want to set expectations to go over necessary documents. There's more that will come your way. We'll introduce what a cost estimate is, and that's something that you'll actually receive a copy of. My other colleague, which typically reviews any project that has any land review piece to it, there will be covenants, bonds, landscape certifications, dedications, pre-inspection checklists, and so on. So there's quite a bit that goes into it that we'll talk about, your timelines, days that you could work up, within what time of the day that you can operate and all that good stuff. And that does change per season, so it's important that you're attending. In attendance, typically we'll have internal county staff, development engineering inspectors. My colleague over here will be leading it. Building inspectors if needed. Sometimes those are involved in our process and they're completely separate pieces, so some people get them mixed up, which we can talk about that. The engineer of record, which we refer to as the EOR, and then the review engineer, which is our internal engineer. If they're able to on the project, they will be in attendance as well to answer your questions. And then we're going to have the contractor, the developer, the owner, and then of course any planning techs that they have or are working with them that are submitting their pieces with there are also involved. So the meeting could be anywhere from quite literally 3 to 10, 15 people, depending on who's involved. So, and now I'm going to pass it on over to Tom.
Thank you, Amil. Good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas McCauley, the Senior Engineering Technician for Development Inspection. So after we conduct the pre-construction meeting, developers can schedule the pre-construction erosion inspection, which is a requirement before groundbreaking can begin. The inspection thereof is typically for the construction entrance and other stormwater erosion mitigation, such as silt fence, straw wattles, inlet protection, and other BMPs of that nature. BMPs standing for best means and practices. Once the pre-construction erosion inspection has taken place and signed off, the developers and contractors can then begin breaking ground. So all the grading and site work may commence at this point. It's at this point that building permits for site plans and NHCs on tax lots can be submitted for, and hold issuances that on building permits that are already existing can be signed off so that the building permit can be issued on NHCs and site plans. You will receive an email from the inspector, including the internal team contact information, phone number, email, address, name, all of the above, and some standard documents for the process in the inspection monitoring portion. The cost estimate that will need to be filled out for public improvements, a request for a native backfill form, a pre-paving checklist, the development inspection sign notice, which you may have seen these signs around the county, which have the erosion control is strictly enforced, and then a fillable traffic control form. After the pre-con and after the pre-construction erosion inspection, the inspection monitoring phase begins. Your inspector will periodically check in on the project and do regular on-site visits. We will be inspecting the construction when we visit, and we will also be inspecting the erosion control when we visit. There's going to be one inspection of each per site visit. It's also important to distinguish the difference between your site inspector or your development engineering inspector and the building inspector. Development inspectors will oversee anything that is outside of 5 feet perimeter of the structure, and building inspectors will oversee anything that is inside of the 5-foot perimeter. Your development inspector will collect any geotechnical reports for compaction or infiltration, and this is going to be on trench backfill, gravel base, asphalt, sidewalks, infiltration galleries, any sort of these construction items that we're looking at. We will help give some direction and guidance when on site. We will not direct your work. If your site inspector is directing your work, they should not be. As the project nears completion, your site inspector will reach out to development engineering to ask them to submit for as-builts. After we get the as-builts, your site inspector will then do a job walk and can then generate a construction punch list. Continuing on in the inspection monitoring phase, the development inspector can follow up on inspections and punch lists / repairs that need to take place. The cost estimates will be requested, and they are then reviewed so that we can look at those and make sure that those are accurate. And these are, again, only on the public improvements. At this point in time, we can also request maintenance bonds or performance bonds or both. Some of the inspection items include catch basins, infiltration trenches, stormwater facilities, fire hydrants, light posts, parking, and landscaping on a collector or arterial, not included in the private portions that are owned by an HOA or by the private property owner. To expand a little bit on the storm infrastructure that we inspect, we'll be looking at the structures themselves, the pipe. For example, if your plans call for PVC, it needs to be PVC. If it calls for ADS, it needs to be ADS. And the acronyms are, I guess, sort of irrelevant, but we will be inspecting and making sure that the proper materials are being used during the construction. So I'll go ahead and turn this back over to Amil here. Thank you very much.
So as we get near the completion of the construction, our inspectors will be out there. Obviously, a high level of communication. Everyone's going to know when we get close. We'll be requesting what I call field as-builts. They're your initial requests that we ask the engineer of record who's working on the party outside to provide us. They're basically almost a final set of what is actually built out there, any changes that are made. They're including any sheets that are pre-approved by us that we've already reviewed, and then any changes that are included would be or have been made on the field will be included in that. And so the inspectors will do their final walkthrough before they sign off on their portion. If all is well, they'll return that back to me in office, and I will have the field as-built and deliver them with a construction completion letter. That is the first portion of the construction completion letter that we have saying that the construction is done, but then there's remaining parts obviously included in that. So it doesn't necessarily mean you are 100% done, but just the construction in the field on the project is actually complete, okay, or very near so. The inspectors on the field as-builts, once they've done their final walkthrough, checked everything else, will have their red line comments. So this is why if you ever received an email from me kicking it back or saying we need those corrections, we really want to reserve that color just for our inspectors to make sure any corrections, any notes, anything that is on the plans is clearly notated and our engineer can actually review that clearly without any question. And then once we receive that and all the notes, I'm actually going to request a final set from the engineer of record to be uploaded to our PD system, which is our project doc system. It's where our reviews are done for all of our engineers. So we have the prelim set, everything that we have done. We'll have the walkthrough where our inspectors will actually walk out, check everything, sign off, saying construction's been good. And then we're going to require a final set after that to be submitted for actual approval and review, to be blessed, if you will, by our internal engineer. So the as-built that are submitted for the engineer, once those built as-built are signed off, as I mentioned, the final as-built have been requested. The engineer of record will obviously submit those and upload them to our project doc system, our review software. On all the plans, when we receive the initial and the final, the things that we do look for that need to obviously be there is the county stamp, unless there were changes made. Those sheets, obviously, if they were made, they will be bubbled and identified, but they would not have our approval stamp, which is what you see here on the bottom right. That's actually a double stamp, but nonetheless, that's what our stamp would look like. And that is saying that we reviewed it and we have approved it. And so the sheets that have changes obviously will not show that, and those are the ones that are bubbled and identified for us to review. The pages will also reflect the stamp indicating the final as-built or record drawing on there. So if it is the final, we needed to make sure that on every single page, including the cover page all the way to the end, and the detail pages need to reflect the wording field as-built or record drawing. That is very important. And then the plan sheets included will show the engineer of record stamp, signed, and dated, which is the bottom left that you see over here. That is an example of an actual engineer's stamp. We need to make sure it is their professional PE is what we call it stamp. It is signed, it is dated, and it tells us when it expires. So that's important. The engineering review timelines, that is when we actually take it in. The inspector has submitted their field as-built, we've requested, and you have uploaded your final set, are 7 days. So that is a minimum of 7-day review and turnaround period. It can extend longer before you're actually what we call batch stamping, before you have final approval from our engineer internally. If they have any comments, if they have any corrections will needed, then I will route the project back in project docs to you or whoever is your applicant that is handling the project. Their goal is to come back and revise, resubmit, get us the corrections needed. We will then submit again, and that will start a new 7-day timeline. So a minimum 7-day turnaround is what we have, assuming from start to finish, everything is good to go. However, if corrections are needed, we restart that timeline. Once you resubmit back those corrections, then we go ahead and start from there. So sometimes we say it's 3 weeks, sometimes it's less. You really never know. We just try to get it to you as fast as possible. Our engineers are diligently working to get everything done, but of course, we want to make sure we're covering the bases and approving everything correctly. While that's happening, there's a lot of back-end work that is being done. Some of the additional documents that I've mentioned earlier are required for a development inspection case, and that is a cost estimate or bonding. So that could be in a form of a maintenance bond or a performance bond. A project that might have any public improvements, right, will require a cost estimate and a bond. We don't worry anything about private. Public improvement is where the county is going to assume that right, assume that responsibility after the project period has been done. So for any project that has, and this can be seen on the plans as well, an arterial collector, anything else that is in the right of way, anything else that is public, that is going to be done with the developer through the project. We obviously need to make sure we have the cost estimate. The cost estimate we send you, you'll get a copy from the beginning. If not, I'm more than happy to forward you an Excel sheet of what we use. It's comprised of multiple cells. A lot of it is, we're just going to review the stormwater, the transportation, and the landscaping. Some of those examples is just the cost associated with the dry wells, manholes, catch basins, and inlets. Anything that has to do with paving, curb, even landscaping sometimes, gutters, sidewalks, driveway approaches, and then trees, ground cover, bark, etc. So those are things that you fill out completely on the cost estimate sheet that we give you based on the type of bond that we are requiring you to have. And then it's used to compute the costs associated with the public improvements. And then we do include sales tax. And then that number is what we use to actually request a formal bond from you. So once we have the cost estimate submitted with all of the included information that we require, I will then send it off to my head inspector and make sure they approve it. Once I have that approval, I will send you a formal bond request letter, with the exact amount of verbiage, a link to the approved legal bond letter that we require to have, and the verbiage needs to be exactly that, and with the exact amount that we will need, okay? The maintenance bond or performance bonds are used on all projects, as I mentioned, with public improvement. A bond is a document of, for those that don't know, it's a document of financial security issued by a surety company that the county then uses to ensure workmanship. So the document will need to be signed, notarized, and stamped for us to accept it. As I mentioned earlier, every word on that needs to match what is legally approved for us, the template that we send you. There are some situations where there's discretion or general review for certain entities, but more than likely it's the exact template that we have to use, and it's just simple as going to your surety company and making sure it's taken care of for the amount that we requested. The developer is required to obtain and maintain the bond. It is the developer's responsibility to make sure they see that through, and obviously continue with the monthly fees to keep that maintained and active, if you will. The bond time frame is a minimum of 2 years. We refer to that period as the warranty period. So the completion, from the completion of the actual construction approval. So once we have the construction approval letter that I mentioned earlier, once we have the approved as-built, all the stamps, everything, we're good to go. We are ready to start the warranty period. That's when the completion letter is officially signed and completed. I finalize that and then make sure all parties are aware that it gets sent out. That is the initial start of the warranty period. So that is the 2-year maintenance warranty period where we are monitoring all the public improvements and everything that's associated with that project to make sure we're keeping up on those requirements. I'll elaborate a little bit more on this one. So for the warranty period, there's going to be a minimum. This is just a brief overview, but the warranty period, there's going to be a minimum of 4 inspections in total. So every 6 months, you will have 1 inspection. Inspector will go out, review the project. They will give you a punch list of anything that is needed for you to review, to correct, to adjust. You will have a list of that, and then I will formally send you a letter saying you have within 30 days or whatever the case is to make sure these are corrected. The additional 6 months, we will come back and do another check. The third and the fourth, which would be 22 months, so right before that 2-year mark, to give you that extra time to make sure everything is completed before we really reach the 24-month period. That 24-month period, we have what we call as a 22-month SWE inspection. Once that is completely done, all the repairs are fully signed off. I will get that approval letter, and once we pass that time, assuming we have everything done, we have their blessings, all parties involved are good to go, then I will actually release the bond at that time. And again, that bond, the formal document that you submitted, will go back to the surety company. You will receive a formal release letter from us saying you are good to go, you've met all the requirements, you are fully accepted at that point. The county's taken responsibility, and we will handle the project thereon. So this is just a bit of an overview kind of from the beginning to end. So after the engineering review, your final plan set will be batch stamped and approved. After we're completely done, a notice of completion letter will be sent out. As I mentioned, that's officially things are done. The warranty period, a notice will be sent, and that's when we will start the 2-year mark. It'll start the 2-year warranty period. There will be an inspection conducted every 6 months during the warranty. So it's just a simple overview of what you guys should expect. And then final inspection will include the punch list, anything that would have to be in the build out or the final stage. The final stage really is where you want to be, or a build out. That's our final go, that you're officially done with development engineering on our side. And then after that, the project is complete. So with that, thank you for coming. So I think this time we're ready to open up for questions.
Yes. So when you ask a question, please use one of the wireless microphones around the room. To use the microphone, you will press the button that's on the top of the microphone. When you are done asking your question, please press the button again to mute the microphone.
Go ahead.
Do the inspectors need to call the homeowner before they come to the property? And if no, can the homeowner request to be contacted prior before they come onto the property?
For a new home construction, when they're inspectors working directly with a homeowner or the homeowner's builder, more often than not, those inspections are indeed scheduled. They are not necessarily scheduled. If the homeowner requests that they are all scheduled, then we will honor that request. More often than not, though, it's usually just direct coordination between the inspector via phone or text with the builder or site work crews. Any other questions?
I had a question on the Cecil certifications. You guys mentioned that the homeowners can be the Cecil themselves. Do they have to complete the class to become a certified Cecil?
If the site is less than 1 acre, they can act as their own Cecil. And I don't think it has anything to do with the amount of grading. But then they would be required to maintain and react to any, for example, there was a discharge of turbid stormwater runoff track out onto the road. They would be responsible for the cleanup and mitigation of that.
Right, but are they required to take the class to become a certified Cecil? I know they're responsible for everything. I'm sure it's probably encouraged, but is it required?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
So most often, if the homeowner is going to be acting as their own Cecil, then the project is really simple and small. They're not going to overtake it. But anytime, the grading is quite large or there's a lot more introduced to the project, a lot more involved, then naturally we will either require them to have a Cecil, someone that is certified, or they will get someone. So the homeowner can absolutely act on their own. Some of them that we've had, they happen to be contractors themselves, so they are technically aware and they know what's going on, so it's easy. But a normal mom and pop, no. If it's anything big, they can handle it. If not, they typically say, what do I need to do? Then we can advise you need to go get someone that is licensed, have taken the class, and has that certification. Any other questions?
If the building inspector signs off, does that mean we're good to go for both building and the den case?
Not quite, but that's a very good question. We actually get that quite a bit. Most folks assume that the inspector have signed off, we're good to go. We have experience work with our development engineer. We kind of work with multiple departments, so we are aware that there are multiple inspectors involved. If the building inspector or anyone who is not a development engineering inspector says you're good to go, it does not mean you are good to go. You will need to call our inspectors, get them out there and make sure they are guiding you and saying for the development engineering aspect of it, for the grading, the stormwater, you'll have a portion of that signed off, which is our portion. But then our building inspectors, and to what Tom was mentioning earlier, typically anything within 5 feet of the perimeter of the structure, that is the building inspector's purview. Anything 5 feet and outside of the perimeter of the structure, we fall into play. That is anything stormwater, grading, ground, and below. So you will need 2 separate sign-offs. It will not be one. It's a great question. We do get that quite a bit, actually. And you need to make sure you have everyone blessing the project. Anyone else?
How do I know who my inspector is and how can I contact him or her?
So after the pre-construction meeting, the applicant, owner, developer, contractor, they will receive an email with the site inspector's contact information and their name. You can directly contact your site inspector via phone, text, email. The building department, I believe, has a text-in line for inspections, or you can schedule inspections online through CCLMS. But for best results, to contact your site inspector for your den case, that's usually a phone call. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
If I'm paying fees for the engineering and grading permits, why do I have to pay more fees for a development inspection?
That's a very good question, and also another one that we get asked often. So when you're submitting your project, you finish the land division or you finish the land use aspect of it, and you're coming in for grading or engineering, you're paying strictly for the review of that project at that time. You're not paying for the inspection. You're not paying for the inspectors being out there and actually monitoring the project itself. So those fees, although they may look the same, it's actually just for the internal review of the project. And then once you submit for the development inspection case, that is actually for the inspection piece of it. We do keep them very similarly named or identified because they correlate with each other. However, it is specifically for the review, and then the other piece is for the actual inspection itself. Anyone else? Go ahead.
How, if I was, as a homeowner, if I have a grading permit, how long is my grading permit good for?
Typically, the grading permit is good for a year from the beginning of when you have it approved until you apply for your development inspection case.
Is that also for my DIN case?
No, once you have your DIN, once you apply for your DIN, your pre-construction date is when your years begin. For our timelines, that is your year to actually get all your work done. Typically play in the dirt until that you reach that 1 year mark. After that 1 year mark, we will need to extend it. Your grading piece for that specific project will stay open until the whole project is complete. Specifically, if you are just a standalone, what we call a grading permit. So if your project is just grading, you'll have the development inspection case going along with it. Both will ride together. However, the pre-con date is what will start your 1 year timeline from us. And then we will review it as we go, 1 year at a time. And then, of course, yours truly will be sending you a message if you do pass that time saying, you have a timeline coming up. Please let us know where you're at.
Thank you.
As a developer, I get a lot of complaints from neighboring communities about work hours and when we're allowed. And I know it differs between the county and then different city ordinances within different city jurisdictions. What is it officially in the county?
In Clark County, Washington, the working hours are from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. And that's based on a Washington State RCW. You may find your work hours can be restricted if you're working in the right-of-way. But typically for any on-site work that you're doing, it's 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week.
And now does that include like just trucks running? Like if they show up as say 6:45 in the morning and they're sitting there with a truck running, they're not actually working, or if they're just starting machines to get them pre-warmed up for the day, does that fall under the 7 to 10, or can they have a vehicle running prior to that?
An idling truck, depending on the nature of the truck, can be quite loud. And typically though, unless you're running heavy equipment or you're using any other big earth moving gear, or if you have compressors, for example, if you're working on homes, nail guns, any loud noises, just an engine idling isn't going to be enough to trigger any issues. Typically though, if a neighbor complains, we will talk to the contractor or developer and ask that if there's any concessions that can be made, we try to make them just so we're playing nice with the neighbors. Want to try to be as thoughtful as we can with the people in the community, because construction activities can tend to disaffect people, on neighboring lots. But we don't want to prohibit anybody and make it more difficult to build or develop than we need to. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so as a contractor, am I responsible for notifying for specific events where I want to have an inspection performed, or is that the role of the county to know when inspection should be performed?
So it goes both ways. Typically, and we say this during our pre-construction meeting, our job is we're on your team. We're on your side. If you have any questions, a lot of the folks that do reach out, they reach to myself, Melissa or Shannon or Michelle. We handle a lot of those questions and field them. So I always like to say over communication is better than under communication. Our intent is to be by your side, just to make sure your project goes smoothly. There's no interruptions or any delays. We understand how one mistake can cause potential 1, 2, 3 months of delays. So we strongly advise during our pre-construction meeting that you do not deviate from your plans. That being said, some folks do follow the plan and the things do come up where they don't check in with us. So I always say, our inspectors are periodically checking in on a project very regularly. So all the time, anytime they are there, if things do come up, things are being answered. But I strongly advise for folks to reach out and schedule their inspections with us. Like Tom was saying earlier, our inspectors, you have to call us directly. We do not have a text in line like the building side on the permit. They have a number they can call in and request it. We also try to go over with them all the times that you do need to, have a conversation with us or call us to come out. So it's really kind of a tag team that we take on the project. But I always advise, if you have a question or you're not sure about anything before moving forward, call the inspector, have them come out. We are more than happy to do so as regularly as you need to make sure your comments and questions are addressed so that you're not making a mistake that will then delay the project.
I'd also like to point out too that if you have the pre-construction meeting with us, with Clark County, you may still have to conduct a pre-construction meeting with the utility purveyors. So if you're in the unincorporated areas of Clark County, you're going to have a separate pre-con with Clark Public Utilities Water and with Clark Regional Wastewater District for your sanitary sewer. And depending on the utility purveyor, that may be City of Vancouver or another utility purveyor, but a separate pre-con will be required. Any other questions?
No one else. Thanks everyone for your time.